Thank you very much. Well, I'm really glad that you're all here tonight. Oops.
We're having the microphones a little spotty.
Not gonna. Okay. I did want to mention a few of the things that we have. Hopefully all of you have a PowerPoint. Does everyone have a PowerPoint and an evaluation form for at the end? As Nancy mentioned, I've run a project that's called the North Bay Suicide Prevention Project, and we're taking. Can I do this without the microphone?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I can play with it while I talk. I run I'm the program coordinator for this program where we're taking our local hotline that we've had for the last 40 years here in Marin County, the 24/7 suicide prevention hotline. I've got hotline cards back there. They look like this. And we got some money from CalMesa, California Mental Health Services Act, so that's where the demographic information, they're curious about who is coming to talks that we do. And we're expanding it to 5 other counties. So I'm up in Sonoma, Napa, Mendocino, and Lake counties. And we now answer calls for all the folks in those counties. So kind of trying to get cost savings and make a little more sense and have this regional hotline. So in doing so, I get to talk to all sorts of different people. And it's really, it's been fascinating getting to know people more. And I wanted to let you know that we have some information. This is specifically on suicide prevention. These brochures back there. And I also...
Just move really
All right, I'll try to move slowly. Gotta see if I can get the magic going. We also have a resource list of different community agencies in Marin County so that provide a number of different mental health and other services in the back. Hopefully this will still continue to work as I sneak over here. So today what we're going to talk about is understanding teen depression, anxiety, and suicide and sort of what's behind that. And Meredith is going to talk about the Teen Screen program here at TAM and looking also at the whole district where we screen. Then we'll talk about talking to your teens about things like anxiety, depression, and suicide. How do you approach that conversation and building the resilience in the teens? So what do you think are some of the signs of some of the signs of anxiety, depression, maybe that your teen is thinking of suicide? What signs might you notice, do you think? Yeah? Isolation. Yeah, so when they normally would be social and want to spend time with friends, they would skip those opportunities. What else? Yes. Sleeping disorders. So either sleeping a lot more or a lot less. Yeah, so typically depression we think of as sleeping a lot, but sometimes it can really interrupt your sleep, and anxiety, I'm sure everyone in the room has had an anxious night when you haven't slept very well. So they both can. Yeah?
Change in their academics.
A change in how they're doing in school. Yeah, so a good student not doing so well. And sometimes we even see the opposite. Meredith, I think, will talk a little bit about that. Any other things you've noted you might look for? Yeah, absolutely. Decreased appetite, especially with kind of severe anxiety or depression. You'll notice that. We'll talk. Something to do with cord here. And it could also be with depression. You can also sometimes see an increased appetite, especially craving for carbohydrates and sugary things. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, cutting could be a sign. Cutting's kind of a coping strategy that is like drinking or drugs. So it gets them through the day, but it's not a healthy coping strategy. Yeah, and it can lead to more dangerous things as well. Yeah.
Crying or mental breakdowns.
Yeah, crying or mental breakdowns. Yeah, so that we'll be talking about that too. This hypersensitivity. Yeah. Oh, you guys know what you're talking about. I'm impressed. So some of the emotional changes that you've mentioned already, irritability is a huge one. We don't always think about this with depression, but and we all do, we all have somebody in our lives who overreacts when we have to tell them things. We're like, oh, I'm gonna have to talk to so-and-so. And when somebody's really irritable and overreacts and grumpy all the time, they may be suffering from depression. It's definitely one of the symptoms. Feelings of sadness, somebody mentioned the crying spells. And that's kind of what we typically think of, right, around depression, is that really sad and maybe crying a lot, tearful, kind of for no reason or for very little things. You know, you were going to stop by Jamba Juice, but you didn't have time, and now they start to cry because you couldn't stop by Jamba Juice. That's sort of not for a big reason.
one of the major signs of depression is this loss of interest or pleasure. So it's kind of like the joy gets sucked out of your life, and things that you used to enjoy doing don't make you feel good anymore, which is pretty miserable if you get up in the morning and nothing's going to make you feel good that day. And that's probably one of the worst depression symptoms that there is. A loss of interest or conflict with family and friends, as somebody mentioned, withdrawing. So just not wanting to hang out. If you already have a teen that is not that social, I wouldn't worry about, if that's sort of their baseline, that's not such a big deal. So we're looking for changes. And then a change in interaction in general. You want to look for feelings of worthlessness and guilt and feeling really less than, that everybody else is better than me. The other kids are smarter, they do better at school, it's easier for them, they're more attractive than I am, they're more popular than I am. And then the sense that life and the future are grim and bleak. So those three symptoms together are kind of the trifecta of depression, specifically when they've got a negative self-image, they've got a negative view about the world around them, and a negative view about the future. So those are definitely three kind of clusters of particularly depression symptoms. Extreme sensitivity to rejection or failure. So just not doing well in a quiz, or little things really bothering them quite a bit. Trouble thinking, concentrating, making decisions. Sometimes after work, if I worked a long day, like for instance, if I went to the grocery store this evening, I would have a hard time figuring out what I needed because I was tired, right? It would be hard for me to concentrate. I think we've all had that experience. But for them, it's all the time that concentrating on schoolwork, or it's almost like there's mud in their heads, much more difficult to concentrate. And that's what both anxiety and depression can cause that. And then, of course, thoughts of death or dying. And again, both anxiety and depression can cause those thoughts. Sometimes what happens with the anxiety is it builds up so much that it creates this depression, and I'm underachieving, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, I'm trying, and then the self-esteem gets lower and lower, and they can start to have some thoughts about death and suicide.
So as we talk, I'm going to talk a little bit about behavioral changes that you see and symptoms with depression and anxiety. But as far as what the difference is, because you may be listening to some of these thinking, my teenager, I'm seeing a lot of these, but I think they're doing fine. So we kind of, like when we look at what the difference between typical teenage behavior and real clinical anxiety and depression, what do you think? What do you think that is when you think about the difference between?
I think there's hormones, like there's a certain norm
Like a chemical?
to being a teenager versus not, that we have to kind of keep it in perspective,
Yes.
but I want to know the difference.
Okay, well, and so
That's
we'll
a hard
we
question
can
to
talk a
know.
little bit, and I even have a great new book out about the teenage brain. If anybody, we love reading. That's casual reading for us. But so we can give you the name of that book. So when we look at these differences, we're really looking at. Melissa mentioned the change. So it's that if you have that teen who's a little more shy and introverted, and they're hanging out at home, kind of in their room, so being a little more isolated isn't going to be out of the norm for them, but it's maybe the teen that is more social and outgoing and does things that all of a sudden they're home all the time, they're in their room. So we look at that change, and you guys know your teens best, so you can kind of see that shift. We also look at duration. How long has this been going on? It's something, when we present the Teen Screen program to all the sophomores, we talk to them about what's it like to have a bad day, how do they know? But we also say, it's not, you don't have to have a bad day if you're having one 10 days in a row. That's kind of that duration, that length of time, that's something you don't have to live with, and that may be depression. And then the other thing we look at is severity. How severe is this? Some teens, is a teen not interested in things they like to do, and it's happening all the time, or they're not interested, they sort of don't want to do anything, versus they might just kind of not want to, they may not, they're avoiding math because that's a class they don't particularly like. But if they're kind of, avoiding everything, that's more severe. And then the last thing we look at is the impairment. How is this impairing their day-to-day life? And again, we see teens, we see a lot of anxiety, social anxiety or anxiety around test taking. So but is that teen avoiding going to school because they have a test, or they're not trying out for the play because they're so fearful of getting up in front of people? Is it getting in the way of their life? So those are that's the difference when we look at clinical depression and anxiety versus just a typical teen. You're going to see the mood swings. You're going to see some of the anxiety and changes, but it's when it's more severe and it's affecting their day-to-day life. Oops, sorry, I went the wrong way. Okay, so as far as behavioral things that we see in a teen who's depressed or anxious, somebody brought up sleep, but teens are chronically tired all the time. I mean, we see that. For them, grabbing a nap or some sleep is actually a big coping strategy that we see. Take a shower and take a nap. Those are their two. But so changes, so sleep is a huge piece that is a sign of, if a teen is sleeping all the time and feeling that, that kind of flat, listless, and you see it physically. I mean, we go to, when we screen the students here, we go to the PE, to the gym, and we pick up students, and we can sometimes see students that physically, in their body are just, it looks like they're carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. It's like you want to just pull these bricks off for them and lighten things up. So that's that kind of tired loss of energy that you see more with depression. Somebody else brought up changes in appetite, but you'll see increase or decrease. And again, there's always this fine line because teenagers' appetites are kind of crazy and up and down a lot anyway because of their busy schedules, and then also an increase in alcohol or drugs. I mean, we see teens who are self-medicating, smoking marijuana or drinking to just calm anxiety, or kind of escaping from depression, feeling, and then agitation and restlessness. Again, this teen who is jittery, you can physically see the signs sometimes with that. As far as just some more sort of behavioral changes, slow thinking and speaking, and another one is body aches, headaches. With someone who's depressed, a lot of the times, that is, you see these somatic symptoms, where the depression is actually creating physical symptoms, and we definitely see that too. And they may be missing school because of it. And school performance, somebody brought that up as well. You guys covered all of our bullet points. But it's also, there's not just poor performance, but this stellar performance, this student who just can't get a B, that perfectionist, but that goes so far that they, the anxiety is really, you can really see that with a student who's, and then neglected appearance sometimes. We see students who, are just, because of feeling depressed, they're not really keeping up on self-care and taking care of themselves, and disruptive or risky behavior, and self-harm. Again, somebody brought that up, but where we are seeing, where someone is cutting or harming themselves, and it, again, as Melissa mentioned, it's an unhealthy coping strategy like alcohol and drug use. But all of those sort of make up these symptoms and signs of anxiety and depression. Our slides got a little mixed up here, sorry about that. So we already covered this, but this is kind of that difference between, and those are the areas that I covered. So I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking a little bit about the Teen Screen program. How many of you, I know we have a solid amount of Mill Valley Middle School parents here, so you may not have heard about it. Because we do screen sophomores at the Marin, 5 Marin high schools. Is anyone familiar with the Teen Screen program? A couple people. So this is good. You guys will learn about the program. So it was a program developed by Columbia University in 1991. And they did significant research on teen issues and sort of what teens are going through and created a computerized questionnaire to assess for these issues. And it also is a tool to promote health and wellness in the schools. And currently, it's in about 500 locations all over the U.S. It's a national program. And again, we screen in 5 schools here in Marin and 1 in San Francisco. And we've been here, this is our 6th year in the TAM district.
It's our 8th.
8th?
We started, this was the very
Where
first
was
school.
I? Oh, I'm so sorry. Right, so TAM was the very first school, and then we added Drake and Redwood. So we've been at TAM for 8 years.
And it's still in the first year, school freshman?
It's sophomores. Yeah, we do sophomores. And you know, one other thing we do find that Teen Screen, you know, it promotes this health and wellness, and like we talk to the students when we present to them. We talk to them about sort of what do we mean when we talk about emotional health. You know, we kind of ask them, and we get some good responses. But what we're able to do is we talk to them about how much, and because we've been here so many years, how important we believe, and the school administrators and everyone in the community, we believe that your emotional health is just as important as your academic and your physical health. So already we're kind of promoting to them, you know, that they've got all these areas in their life, but this social emotional piece that, you know, typically isn't addressed at school. They're here just to take classes. So we're almost, in a way, we feel like we're a little like the curriculum here. You know, it's a voluntary program, but we usually screen, you know, 40–50% of the sophomores. So we just promote this kind of thing that, you know, health and wellness is just as important as academic health. And the goals of Teen Screen, one, first and foremost, is suicide prevention. So we are a tool to, the screen asks questions, a few questions related to that. So we're checking in with students on that, and if they're having any suicidal thoughts or attempts. Yep.
Sorry. You said you screened 40–50% about, why isn't everyone screened? How do you decide?
Well, it's voluntary, so we come in, we come in and I know you think, right, we want everyone to do it. We send information to the parents, and they, so it's a letter and information, and then we present to the students. We give them a chance to, you know, understand a little bit about what it's about, and we like for them to buy into it and kind of, and then they sign up. So they have to have parent permission, so they sign it and the parents sign it, and that's just usually where we.
Seems to me, and you're the expert, but if I'm depressed, I'm less likely to sign up for that. I'm embarrassed that, you know, people are going to know my big secret, and
Yeah.
I would think you'd be less likely to do it than someone that's like, hey, this is fun.
And you're right, but what makes it really effective is that it is voluntary, so it's not something that they're required to do. And we do, you know, I think we do get a lot of students that come in that either, you know, the parents suggest they do it, they have a conversation. We catch a lot of students.
I think what's important to note, it is dual consent, so both the child and the parents have to consent, because if the test comes back with some kind of propensity for depression, mental illness, whatever, then you've given consent that we're going to bring you, the student, and you, the parent, together with a counselor and give you ideas of where you can seek help. So it is important that it's two. The other thing is, it's an online screening tool, and you'd be surprised at how these kids, you know, they tell everything on a computer. They just answer the question and answer, and they don't, as opposed to talking to a person. It's amazing. The last thing I'll say.
I love it. Yeah, you're a big promoter of Teen
We
Screen.
get these letters that the students will occasionally write, and they'll share them with the board, and these letters are just heartbreaking. Remember the first time I saw one of these letters with somebody saying, thank you for asking these questions. Nobody has ever asked this of me before. Or we had this one gal who showed a high propensity, and then later we found out when we brought that she actually answered the questions the way her mother would, because she was afraid her mother had those tendencies. So just that stuff is just amazing.
Thank you. But so we feel like we do reach a lot of students, and we empower them to sign themselves up, and I think it makes it more, you know, it works. But it would be nice to have everyone do it. So that pretty much the last piece, which I know Nancy touched upon, but part of the program is to provide support for families. You know, we will, for a student who needs and wants counseling or help and they didn't know, we find students who just didn't know how to ask or embarrassed to ask, and so we will put the family in touch with, sometimes we're in touch with families for up to a year, whether it's just navigating, finding a therapist through insurance or what have you. So we provide that support. So specifically, what it is, Teen Screen, it's a computerized questionnaire. It usually takes students about 10 to 15 minutes to answer questions on the computer. And these are sort of the areas that we look at, and these were the issues that Columbia identified as all the core teen issues. So suicide, depression, anxiety, substance use, PTSD, eating, and there's a few brief questions about vision, hearing, and dental. And what the screen actually is created with an algorithm that looks at all these symptoms and impairments, sort of. So what's going on, and then how is it affecting that student? And it creates thresholds for these areas. And then a student, if they if they exceed the threshold, they become what we call a positive screen, and they have a longer check-in interview. So they do the screen, and then they have a little interview with one of us, or one of our trained screeners. If they come below the threshold, they become a negative, and they just have this shorter interview. So it looks like things are going pretty well. So that's kind of how, and so we're either solidifying with the teen that everything's going well, we're kind of solidifying the things they're doing. So how are you getting yourself out of a bad day? And we kind of take that approach. And then the longer interview students, we just probe a little more about what's going on, and then we end up providing some of those teens with support or not. Some of them it looks like things are going fine, and the screen is really designed to really have more false positives, which means a student will come up positive, which means it looks like they're having maybe some struggles, and they have the longer interview. We'd rather more students come up a few more that way, and then when we interview them, it looks like things are going okay, and send them on their way, versus missing those students that may be struggling. So it was designed to kind of do that. And it's not a diagnostic tool, so we're not diagnosing students. We are just checking in to see how things are going, and then recommending, if the student wants it, for those students, some extra support. And this is kind of how it stacks up. About 25% of the students go on to that longer interview. So it looks like things are, maybe they may be struggling in some area. But most of the students, 75%, things are going really well. And about 2 to 8 teens at each school are reporting thoughts of suicide. This is what the district looks like. We don't include Drake, but we've got Redwood and Tam. And really the national average, this is for participation. So the national average is about 25 to 30%. Is it 30? Yeah, 30. So in this, we're above that here. We tend to get 35, 40, really good participation. And the national average is for that percentage I mentioned of students that go on to that longer interview. So that's the national average is about 25, and TAM, the district here, is about 27, so it's right in that kind of national average. And we're seeing here about 10 to 15% symptoms of depression, 10 to 15 of anxiety, 5 to 10 eating, and 10 to 15 of alcohol and other.
Do you have actual statistics on how many actually do attempt suicide here in this district, or no?
Could you repeat the question?
Oh, you were asking about
Yeah,
how many in the
actual-
district
yeah.
attempts of suicide?
Yeah, these are just the screening, but I'm curious about where we stack up with nationwide, how many kids actually attempt suicide here.
So
in
we're
this
gonna, so Melissa's
later
gonna,
on?
yeah, the next section coming up right now, your good
Okay.
segue is Melissa's gonna cover that. Okay, any other questions? About
yeah, I-
Teen Screen?
Sorry, just a quick question was, so I presume parents are well notified in advance when your child is in when they start the second year at TAM, okay, the screening's coming up soon. mean, it's not just low-key, it's pretty,
Yes.
I'd be afraid I'd miss it, like.
Oh, yeah, oh, no, no, they do, the school does, an email, I'm emailing and a mailing to all the students, and then when we present to the students, we give them a permission slip. I mean, we know that probably a big percentage might not come home, but, so that's why we cover our bases and do
And it's
both.
done at the start of the year, second
It,
month or
it's
so.
throughout the year. The TAM district does fall right around November, January, February, yeah, kind of that middle chunk of the year. Yeah.
Can a freshman student or their parents choose to participate in this, even though you don't target them?
You know, it is set up for sophomores. I think if you were interested in doing the teen screen, that's something you could do at our agency. Yeah, we would set that, we see teens and we would, we could do something for you there to do the screening at our agency. So we have a trained staff that, of clinical interns that work at our agency. And that's what I used to do. I was one of those for years. I've been part of the program for years and now run the program. So they're trained clinicians. Okay. So now Melissa's going to talk a little bit about how to talk to your team.
Okay. Whew.
Think good thoughts. All right.
So, how do we protect our teens against anxiety, depression, and thoughts of suicide? I mean, it's something that's happening, and it goes to your question you asked about how many students are having thoughts of suicide. I didn't put those statistics together for the PowerPoint, although I could have. It just didn't occur to me. What we know in general for statistics is that for each completed suicide of a youth, there are 1 to 200 attempts. So it's something that happens quite frequently. I mean, we've definitely talked to teens that have had 3 or 4 attempts by the time we've interviewed them in 10th grade. So it happens. And thankfully, youth are inexperienced on the planet, so they're not completing the suicides, and we have some time to intervene and get them the help they need. So one of the most powerful things that you have as a parent is being able to talk to your teen and talking to them in a really honest and transparent way is super powerful. And talking about mental health, so anxiety, depression, thoughts of suicide, is very much like sex and drugs. It's not necessarily the most comfortable conversation you're going to have, but it's one you need to have. And if they're already dealing with the issues, you can't plant anything in their minds. It's already there. But really being honest and empathetic with them. And obviously it's not the same time that you're yelling at them to clean their room for the 55th time this week. You want to pick your spots when you're talking about it. Let them know that you've noticed some of the changes that we talked about, that you've seen some differences, and that you're worried about them, and you love them, and you care. And sometimes, and this is true, it doesn't mean that you're not the perfect parent, but sometimes teens don't want to talk to parents about what's going on. They want to talk to somebody else. So really helping them find that. I remember I had one girlfriend who, her son didn't talk to her his entire high school career, but he would go spend some time at a friend's house, and she'd check in with that mom to see how he was doing. And it was kind of, so she knew how he was doing. Their relationship's great now, but just he wasn't talking to mom most of the time he was in high school. And so she found other ways to kind of keep an eye on him. So sometimes you need to figure out who they can talk to. Is it a counselor at school, a teacher, a coach, maybe a therapist is appropriate, depending on your teen. So I just wanted to briefly look at the suicide rates for 15 to 24-year-olds. And what I've got here in the green, it's the United States. The brown is California, and Marin County, where we have a higher than average suicide rate, is in the orange. So you can see that we've really had some ups and downs. So these rates are based on 100,000. These are not percentages, okay? They're based on per 100,000. So the US rate is about 10. That's fairly consistent. And you can see Marin has been all over the place. 2010 was a horrible year. We had a number of high school and middle school students die by suicide. And I'm just so happy that in 2012, we didn't have any in this age range. No one died by suicide in Marin County between the ages of 15 and 24. We did have one middle schooler who was 12 who went to White Hill who died by suicide, unfortunately. And I just actually was looking at some of the corner reports before before I came over today. And last year we had 4 deaths in that category. 2 were 18-year-olds, one of which went to Redwood High School, the senior that died by suicide. And 2 were a little bit older in their 20s. And this year we've had in 2014 we've had 1 death, the senior in the high school area, the senior who went to San Rafael High School a couple of months ago, unfortunately. So it's something that we're really working on and trying to improve, and it really starts with what we're going to be talking about in a minute. So what do you think? Do you think this is a myth or a fact? Confronting a person about suicide is only going to make them angry and increase the risk of suicide. It might even cause them to think.
What do you think about
That
that? Is that a
myth or a fact? Why? Why do you say that?
Communication is the key.
Communication's the key. So people are actually very relieved, not just teens, but anybody that's been having thoughts of suicide. We're usually ashamed if we're having those kinds of thoughts. We think that something's wrong with us, that we're broken, and that we're crazy, and I can't believe I'm even thinking about this. But somebody's in so much pain, and that's why they're thinking about it. They have, their thought process has gotten so narrow because they're in so much pain. So suicide seems like the solution to their problem. How am I going to get out of this pain? I can't figure it out. I can't figure it out. So this is my solution. And it's by talking to them that you're able to open that thinking up and start a dialogue that can actually save their life. So one of the other part of this myth is that a lot of people are afraid that if they talk about suicide, just like with drugs and sex, that they're going to plant the idea in somebody's head. And we can tell you, as well as studies, I have asked so many people if they're having thoughts of suicide, never once do they say, no, I wasn't, but that's a great idea. Right? That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. So it's scary, though. I just did a training this morning up in Napa, a 3-hour training where it was a suicide prevention training, and a lot of the people were mental health professionals. And we did the role play afterwards, and I'm like, well, how was it? It was really hard to ask about thoughts of suicide. It's hard because it's kind of a taboo, stigmatized subject in our society, but kids do think about it from time to time, so it's a good question to ask. Yes?
So is it the slide before said that you asked the child, the teen, I've noticed some changes or
Whoops.
about
Yeah.
it? Is it beneficial to ask like I'm a middle schooler to talk to them about it when I haven't noticed changes so that she knows to come and talk to me if she starts having those thoughts?
What do you think?
I would say yes. I mean, just. But
Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly. You want to start opening up that dialogue before they have problems. Exactly. And then it really gives you permission to re-enter when you have noticed some changes and some difficulties are going on. That's brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. You want to start talking to them about it before they have problems. You can even say, yeah, you're going to be going to high school soon and things are changing in your body and the way you're even thinking. I mean, that middle school age is such an interesting age. If they saw a movie in 6th grade and saw the same movie in 8th grade, they'll see it completely differently because their awareness has changed so much. And so you can talk about that and leverage that as a way of, making this an okay thing to talk about. So here's how you can ask the question. So you can ask kind of a little bit less directly. Do you ever wish you could go to sleep and never wake up? Kind of trying to see what's going on. Do you ever wish you were not here? Probably my favorite way to ask the question, because it makes it relevant, is, when people are as upset as you seem to be about blank, about the breakup, about, this big disappointment, about not getting on that team, they sometimes wish they were dead. I'm wondering if you're thinking about that too. And just kind of opening it up for them. And being direct. It's a funny, awkward thing. Yes?
I've heard that, that's one of the tricky things with website, like Facebook and stuff now, when kids go online, that they feel free to say all kinds of stuff. What do you do? I mean, don't some teenagers just say stuff like, oh, I wish I was dead because, they're grounded? Or is every time somebody says that, should that set off an alert system, for us as parents, or,
Right. So you're saying that sometimes they just say, oh, I wish I was dead. This is so awful. My parents grounded me for a week. I had a golf partner who used to hit her head on the golf cart and say, oh, I want to kill myself when, her putt didn't sink. But she never attempted. So sometimes you want to investigate. Is that the isolated and just sort of the language they're using, or is there something else going on? So you want to kind of...
I just heard from, this has been an issue at schools because, some subject a little, because that's one other thing is that, you know, depending who you tell, there's legal duty to set a lot of things in motion.
Right.
And, you know, next thing you know, you may be concerned, but maybe social services is arriving at that family's door and pulling a kid out of there. I mean, that's.
Yeah, so Meredith and I, because we're marriage and family therapists, we're both mandated reporters, and that's harm to self, suicidality, harm to others, and child abuse or elder abuse. And so we talk to people, and at Teen Screen, we have actually, I mean, knock on wood, we haven't had to 5150 we haven't had to have the police come and take them to psychiatric emergency services because they weren't imminent. You have to have that imminence. So having a plan and a means to do it is very different from, oh, I don't want to be here anymore. It hurts too much. That person's probably not ready to get hospitalized yet, but the person who says, oh yeah, when my parents are taking my little sister to the soccer game, the tournament this weekend, I'm going to kill myself, and I've got, you know, this is my plan to do it. That's the person that it's got more eminence. So the beauty of Teen Screen and of starting this dialogue with your children is that you're going to find them way upstream in the I'm just having thoughts about suicide instead of I've made the plan for suicide, and catching it earlier. And so anytime that somebody's talking about it, it's appropriate to say, wow, you're thinking about killing, you know, and just be really honest, really, you know, compassionate about it, and find out if there is something going on there or if it was just sort of the language they happen to use.
So what would we as parents say? I mean, I've been in this situation where, like my daughter has said, you know, my friend was crying at school. She says, oh, and she's always saying, I just want to kill myself. But she's overly dramatic. She's never made an effort to kill her. Like, I don't know. Like, do I go to a teacher? What's my job as a parent? What would you recommend?
I would say call the school counselors, or if you have a relationship with the parents, let the parents know.
Yeah, often the parents are difficult.
Yeah. So the school counselor is really a great resource, and we use that most times when we do Teen Screen. There's one student that comes in and says, I'm worried about this friend of mine because of X, Y, and Z. And so we go right to the counselor. The counselor's able to call him in, check in with them, see what's going on.
You're talking about the language. So if you hear anything that's even, is it probably better to err on the side of being extra safe and just reporting it to somebody at school? If we
Yeah.
feel like we call a counselor, we feel like we've done what we need to do, because then they need to follow up.
Exactly. So, and the counselors, you know, would know that student probably a little bit better and from a different perspective than your student. Well, not better than your student, but definitely from a different perspective, and be able to pull the resources together that were necessary and check in. Yeah, I think.
Those teens within the teens suicide, were they somewhat in this program? If they were in the, you know,
Teen Screen.
yeah,
The students that she's going to die.
Were they in Teen Screen? We don't have information on that. I mean, yeah, I don't have information on that. At San Rafael High School, he was a senior, so they certainly weren't. The last two that have died have been seniors, so certainly they weren't screened that year. Yeah, and they may have been screened 2 years before that. Yeah.
Were they showing signs of suicide?
I wouldn't have that information. Yeah.
So the most critical years are 15 to 24, or whatever you have.
Actually, the years that teens are at highest risk for suicide are 8th graders and 10th graders. Yeah, those are the two highest risk years where we see more suicides. And 10th graders. Yeah. There's not a definitive answer to that, but part of it is that, you know, 8th grade, middle school is hard, and there's a lot of transition, a lot of change that's happening. And then 10th grade is much harder. Freshman year is usually easier academically, and 10th grade, your grades count. There's a lot more stress, and can be a lot more overwhelming for a lot of students. There is this app called My3 app that is free for iPhones and Android phones that you can search My3 safety, and if you're worried about your student, your teenager, you can put this on their phone. You can put in who they'd call if they were having thoughts, and then there's a whole place to put a safety plan, including, you know, what makes them start thinking about it, what can they do to distract themselves, who can they call and hang out with, where's a safe place, what's a reason that they want to be here, what's their biggest reason for wanting to live. So it's a nice tool to have. And of course we have our hotline number, which you can call 24/7. If you're worried about somebody, you can always call them and they can help you figure out what the next steps would be. So I'm going to hand it over to Meredith.
So all of that is connected to this last part that we want to talk about is resilience.
Oh, I need to be louder? Okay. I do have a loud voice. So what is resilience? Does anyone, when you think of resilience, bouncing back, absolutely. That ability to, that's exactly how I always think of it, that ability to bounce back from, from anything that's hard. Anyone else? That resilience? Strength, emotional strength. Mm-hmm. So that ability to, right, again, to have strength to deal with adversity, to deal with, and here's sort of a standard definition, but that is this idea of bouncing back, recovering quickly from change, and the idea that it's using skills, is important, because part of what we want to talk about is that this isn't just something that you are born with, but these are skills that you can develop. And really, teens, this is a crucial time for adolescent development. A crucial area is resilience, and how do they bounce back? And Melissa likes the word buoyancy, but right, that how do you float in those rocky waters? And again, this idea that we can help our teens develop resilience, and what we want to do is give you guys some tips on ways to help develop resiliency with your teens, and again, to always keep in mind, like I always think of resilience as something again that you can develop, and that I'm constantly, I always think of, I'm looking at myself and how do I continue to build resiliency. Like for example, I've got teens myself, and I kind of remember just last weekend, demanding I need a ride here. I'm cleaning up after them. I'm doing all these sorts of things, looking for missing cell phones. All of a sudden, and they're calling me grumpy and chill out, and I'm thinking, you're right, actually. So I said to them, I am. I'm gonna stop and go take 3 hours to myself. So I'm modeling this ability to take a time out, a break. Like I'm the type that kind of takes on too much, and so I kind of, so I modeled for my teens this, and so I'm constantly looking at ways to develop this resiliency, and that's part of what we want to share with all of you, is that, you can really teach and help your teens develop some of these things. And these are things, we've got 10 little tips to cover, and they may be things you guys I'm sure a lot of you are doing already, but maybe we can remind you of a few you've sort of forgotten about, or maybe give you some new ideas of how to help your teen. So the first one is kind of making connections. And, for teens, having the ability to make those friendships and then that positive reinforcement they get back is such a great self-esteem builder, and a way for them to feel that strength because they've got a network of friends. And for some of those kids that struggle with making friends at school, we look at how can you expand that? How can you sort of make that the ability for them to make friendships bigger, like something outside of school, something they're interested in, horseback riding, or just some sport or some artistic thing, where if school can be hard, and some kids do have, more challenges at a big high school making friends, making that a little bit bigger for them. And one really important thing, and I know Melissa talked about this, the one protective factor for your teens is this being able to communicate and talk to them about, and really having that ability to really let your teen know that you understand them is one of the core foundations for building this resiliency. I mean, you might not always agree with them, I'm sure, a lot of the times, but it's that having them be heard and understood gives you a lot of, it creates that foundation with them, where then they're going to be more receptive to some of the things that we're going to cover. So it's that kind of having that strong foundation with your relationship, and that's sort of this last piece, that building a network for your teen. The second one is this helping others, and there's a lot of research on ways to help with depression, and giving back is a big one. We see this a lot, but that's one strategy that working with people with depression. So teens, this encouraging them to help others, to participate in volunteer work, doing things like that. Those are great ways to, and even taking on new responsibilities, encouraging them to do something, a leadership, take on a new role at school or a part-time job or something like that. Again, that builds resiliency and self-esteem. And the third one is maintaining a daily routine. And, and this may conflict with, not everyone loves a routine. This may even, as a parent, conflict with sort of with your style, but letting them, even if there's a few things that they can do, it always creates that sort of sense of safety and consistency. These kids are so busy, they have a lot going on, and they're so distracted by all the social networking and phones and things like that. I think it's hard to kind of keep that routine. So that can be really good, and again, modeling that, like picking a few things. Like I always like the evening, I call it a power outage, but sort of having everything turned off, like by 10 or something. So there is that little bit of routine. Now, having said routine is good, this kind of is a little bit different, because routine is good, but also taking a break. So some of these kids do so much. I'm sure you see your kids either, in so many activities, they're constantly going. So it's this teaching them to have a break. That example I gave of myself, where, I'm kind of I do a lot, and so to stop and say, look, I'm going to take some time. I need a break. I need to kind of give myself a little self-care, and be aware of what your teen is exposed to. You had a great story. You want to share that just with the teen? But they're watching the news. They're on the internet. They're Googling. They're exposed to so much more than than I ever. So you just had that good story
I
about.
talked to a teen who, that's my friend here. I talked to a teen who was concerned after the tsunami in Japan about radiation and had been quiet. She was a teen I knew in my personal life and had been, hadn't said a word about it, but was seeing the news, and she was really worried about radiation poisoning. And are we all going to get this? Is this going to be happening? And nobody's talking about it. She had this real worry, and she was an 11th grader. So sometimes teens, they'll see something on the news and not be able to quite process it completely. And if they have a little anxiety there, they could get magnified for them.
And then another, I remember being with a teen who described his life as sort of a hamster wheel. And it was like, all I do is get up, go to school, go to sports, study, homework again, eat, back, and then start all over again, and it's just was this constant, and there was no joy. He was very, that's felt like his life. And so it's like encouraging some variety, taking a break, doing, things for that joy. And some teens need that. They're just sort of powering through and putting a lot of pressure on themselves. So number 5 is self-care. Taking that time, which kind of relates to taking a break, but really looking at and we talked about sleep, which is such a big topic. We could talk for a long time about sleep. We do see a lot of teens that are sleep deprived. It's kind of the hallmark of these teenage years is not sleeping, but it is. Inadequate sleep is a big contributor sometimes to depression and irritability. If they're not getting enough sleep, and a lot of the research is saying 9 hours for a teenager, which, how many of your teens get 9 hours? Some of you? Excellent. Okay, that's great. Okay, good. That is actually a time for their brains to, it's a development time for teen brains. And they even, the studies are showing, that teens, have you ever noticed that you're ready for bed and your teen is just getting geared up, right? Like you're going to bed at 9, I can speak for myself. And they're truly, their biological clock is almost shifted back 3 hours. Their releasing of melatonin is happening later. This is a biological phenomenon where then they stay up later, but they have to get up for school.
Why
So
don't they
they're
change the school schedule?
well, that's, what, I knew someone would bring that up, but that would be another whole topic that we can't, but that is, But just what it helps is gives you perspective and understanding about sort of even biologically what's going on with your teen. Like this is something, that is biological. And I do have a great book if anyone's interested to recommend sort of about all this. I find it fascinating. Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Can you speak a little bit to insomnia? You had it in the beginning list, but just elaborate on that. That seems like a biological, something else is kicking in, or melatonin's not working right, and when they get into a pattern of insomnia.
Well, I'm not that familiar. I mean, teens do tend to have issues with sleep and anxiety, and I think hormonally, and we were saying with the brain, they're kind of up later, and then they're sort of stimulated by all of this. I mean, insomnia, I'm sorry, I can't really speak. Do you want to share anything with
Yeah,
insomnia?
a lot of teens will have they're worried and their mind starts racing, which I think as adults we sometimes have too. And because they don't have coping strategies yet around what to do with all those anxious thoughts, and they just got the spinning happening, they don't know what to do with that. And so a lot of times if you can help them get coping strategies, you can master that. But sometimes, you need to look at their diet. How much sugar are they having at night? How much caffeine are they having at night? Are they drinking a lot of water so they have to get up and go to the bathroom all the time? So you kind of need to look at it holistically, and I would definitely check in with the pediatrician as well. But sometimes it's anxiety that really drives that. A lot of times when people are depressed, they can fall asleep, but then they'll wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning.
And those strategies are, sometimes even in those teen screen interviews, we're doing some of that right there on the spot, that comes up. And we'll talk to them about ways to keep that little pad of paper by your bed, all those things that you start worrying about, that you forgot to do this, you forgot to do that, oh, I didn't, and you're writing them down, getting them out of your thoughts on a piece of paper, and, and a ritual, like a sleep hygiene, where it's calm music, and turning off that technology. All those things are great ways to, and if it is chronic insomnia, clearly check out with the doctor and see what else is going on. But so the self-care is number 5, and you're going to continue with. Any questions on the?
Can I have the remote, please? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so we've got 5 more resiliency tips here. Moving toward your goals. So it makes us all feel good when we achieve something, right? Sometimes on the weekend, I'll just write my list, and nothing feels better than crossing everything off. But pardon me? So you want to teach your teen to set reasonable goals, and you want to help them figure out what that is. And so to get straight A's for every teen is not possible, right? That's crazy to think that everybody's going to be at the 100th percentile. So maybe straight A's isn't really reasonable for your teen. So maybe trying to help them have reasonable goals and even micro goals. And so not just the end grade, but getting my homework in every night. Maybe I'll just do that, and hopefully I'll get a better than a C. So trying to help them, manage those goals instead of setting the bar so high that they might not even try hard because it's too hard. Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but how do you work that with what the goals the school has for her? To say, like, obviously,
You guys hear that
straight
question?
A's, that's one. You could say you don't need to get an A, or you just need to try your best. But to say, I'm just going to get my homework done, but what if they have a project? And what if they, all teachers, so how do you know?
So how do you meld that with the teacher? So if with the teacher and the goals of the school, how do you back off? So what you want to do if your teen's really struggling and their C's are really challenging, you'd want to meet with the teachers and say, what can we do? Where's some room here? How can we make this work? Because my students, and especially if they are struggling with anxiety or depression, it could get in the way of their concentration, their ability to do the work. So working with the teachers and we don't want to be that overly hovering parent where we're, taking that student's not having any ways of learning to negotiate, helping them advocate for themselves, but also stepping in when they're really having trouble. If they're in between the B and the C, maybe you can start negotiating with, what they need to be thinking about doing. And instead of just saying, this is the bar, you have to achieve that. When it's too high, it gets really frustrating and it can deteriorate their self-esteem. So the more you communicate with the school, the easier that'll get. And a lot of the schools here in the TAM district, they have peer-to-peer tutoring, right? So you could help your student sign up for that, and that's at no cost, from my understanding. Yeah, positive reinforcement, praising your student for doing things. Positive reinforcement changes 95% of behavior. So if you notice what your teen is doing well, instead of pointing out what they aren't doing well, it will actually help them notice what they're doing well instead of feeling like a failure and feeling like they're just not getting it done and they're just a loser. Breaking assignments down. And you could even, if you're working on a project, you can show them how what Meredith was talking about, you can model that behavior and say, wow, I've got this big thing due at work. So, at first it was really overwhelming, so I decided to think about it this way. And they're in the car with you, right? They're a captive audience. And you can kind of model how you're handling, how you're managing things and breaking it down in smaller tasks for them. Nurturing a positive self-view. This is so important. We human beings are really mean to ourselves. We've all said nasty, nasty things to ourselves that we would not accept from other people. We wouldn't. We'd be like, you're not saying that to me. I'm walking out the door. So part of it starts with that positive self-talk and helping them develop a positive self-dialogue. And I'm sure, because we're all human beings in this room, that you've probably said not nice things about yourself out loud in front of your teen. God, I'm such an idiot. I totally didn't get this that I needed at the grocery store. What is wrong with me? Right? We say that. So helping them to kind of learn the positive self-talk. Helping them learn and think about how they've handled difficult times. So kind of that strength building. Wow, remember when you were, in 6th grade and you're really struggling with XYZ and you found that solution, or you're having a hard time with that friendship and you found a way around it. So helping them remember their strengths and teaching them to see the humor in life and the ability to laugh at oneself. I had something funny happen this morning when I was presenting. I showed a film that was from the internet that was about a CHP officer on the bridge and who's saved a lot of lives. And because it was on the internet, there was like a little pre-thing that came on. And it was something I did not expect. It was a skit from Saturday Night Live that was about a male present in a box. I don't know if any of you have seen that. I was a little surprised when that came on. And we just all laughed, right? I mean, one of those things that happens. And so, helping your teen laugh at something, at that moment where you could cry or laugh, always choose the laughter. Help them see the laughter in it. Yeah.
This thing I find is one of the trickiest things is about their judgment. Like here it says, get them to trust the decisions they make. But as a parent, that's one of the trickiest things. I don't know if you have any advice about that. But like so often their judgment is just bad, or their judgment is bad.
All right, their judgment is.
I feel like I'm always trying to talk to them about that. Like how to solve the problem. But a lot of times they don't really know. But you don't want to get in there and do it for them, and it's sort of.
Yeah, so I kind of think of it as scaffolding, and when they're infants, they've got a brick wall around them. It's watertight, and then the older they get, there's more air, there's more light that gets in, and when they start to talk about something that's bothering them, and they come to you, or you're saying, "How I'm really worried about this situation, and we need to talk about it," let them tell you how they're going to solve it. Like, what do you think? You've dealt with hard situations before. How do you want to do this? And then encourage what's right. That's really, yes, I think you're absolutely down the right alley, and maybe you can think about this. And so then kind of filling in the blanks.
So that's a great idea.
Yeah, getting them to solve it as best they can. Encouraging.
Assisting them and guiding them.
Yeah, encourage the parts of their plan that sound good, and then filling in where they're a little spotty. Yeah.
And then watching them go, and they might make mistakes, and if it's not a safe
you could talk about that
situation.
after too.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right,
Sometimes it is about safety. Or
Mhm.
Right, you're gonna.
Yeah, and sometimes you're going to have a boundary and say, well, that's not going to work. There's that book, The Blessing of a Skinned Knee, that's about, kids build resiliency from falling and getting back up, right? So keeping things in perspective and maintaining a hopeful outlook. I'm going to admit it, I'm an optimist, okay? Some people don't think that's cool, but I wake up and think it's going to be a good day, and it usually is. People who are optimistic actually have more fun and they enjoy their life more. Who knew? All right, studies are pretty clear about this. So teaching your teen to have that, and so again, by modeling it yourself, by having not expecting the world to be perfect and, Pollyanna-ish, but trying to see the positive outlook in it. So even when there's painful events, helping them look for the situation. So when we go through painful events in our lives, grief even, it's one of the biggest opportunities we have for personal growth. And so it's kind of that phoenix rising situation. And so we learn a lot about ourselves in those situations, and helping your teen navigate through that in a very, empathetic, compassionate way. Helping them see that there's a future beyond this situation. 2 weekends ago, I was at Marin County Office of Education doing a presentation with one of the CHP officers, Andy Barclay, and he was saying his two most difficult, not least favorite, but the most difficult situations that he sees on the bridge, because they talk about 120 people off the bridge. Our Marin Highway Patrol officers, they're amazing, each year. In a year. In a year's time. So that, that's a couple a week, right? It's a lot of people. And he said that the teenagers and the elderly folks that have some sort of illness, the terminal illness, are the hardest ones. So it makes sense with an elderly folk that's got, terminal illness, that would be tough. But he said with the teens, they're not really seeing this. They're thinking that they're defined by whatever this happened, the breakup, this disappointment of not getting into the school, not, getting cut from that team, whatever is really major to them. So helping your kids see beyond that. And you can let them know when difficult situations happened for you. I had a situation, I didn't get my license until I was 20. That was for a variety of reasons, but, and I was, I was in college and at home for the summer, and I remember I flunked the first time. And I ran upstairs to my room and I cried, and, it was just awful. But it did not have any impact at all on my life, right? But it felt awful at the time. And so if you can share a story like that with your teen, a moment that was really hard for you, but didn't really matter. And I wouldn't say that to them it didn't matter. It was, it hurt your feelings a lot. Maybe I felt some shame, like, God, what a loser am I, if I couldn't do that. But help them see that and how it doesn't have to last forever. Making mistakes is really how we learn. So a lot of the things, you saw with this microphone how many times I tried and what I did. And so finally I gave up because it didn't make sense to keep on pursuing something that wasn't working well. But we learn from mistakes. Like when I first started to do presentations about suicide prevention, I thought, well, why don't we have everybody introduce themselves and say why they're here tonight? That was a mistake, because some people were there because they'd had a loss by suicide or they'd attempted themselves, and it was very triggering and it caused emotional upheaval. So it was not a good idea, and I learned, hugely from that, and of course never done that again. But it's our mistakes that that's where the learning happens. When we do something right, we don't really learn from that, but from our mistakes we do. And so helping our teens see that that's where, maybe if you got that grade and you thought you did much better on that paper and it felt devastating because you deserved that grade, but help them see the learning and, your teacher was really looking for this instead of that, and how could you switch that around instead of mistakes being bad. And the final tip is, life is full of change and stuff happens, We don't have a rosy perfect life, the microphone didn't work, but we found a way around it, right? Everyone got creative. Change happens. That's one of the things that we can guarantee, right? We've got taxes, dust, death, and change. We know things are going to change. And helping your teen get more prepared for that. It's going to happen. So that could be good or bad. Change can be both. And then, let them know that, things are going to happen. I had a weird car accident a couple of months ago where it was a rainy night and I drove over something that I didn't even see. I couldn't see it at all because there was a big bushy thing here. And when I took my car in to get it fixed, they're like, you hit a deer that was probably already on the ground that you couldn't see because it was covered by the bush. So instead of having, crying and getting all upset, and I can't believe this happened to me, I just called the insurance company and, it all got fixed. So sometimes there are going to be these obstacles, and sometimes we're going to have to help our teens have more realistic goals. So a lot of teens are looking at things like American Idol and thinking, I want to be a famous singer. Well, geez, that's not within my range. I don't know if it's in your range. And it's great if they love singing, but not everybody can be a great singer. Not everybody can be a professional athlete. And to help them kind of have these realistic goals and not think that they're less than if they can't achieve this really high goal that they see. And a lot of the media images that we have, push them to wanting to have those goals.
That's a really hard line, and I find that's, how do you build up your kids and say, yeah, I believe in you, and the line of, that's just not going to happen for you. My son trying out for competitive soccer, I knew he would not make it, but show you believe in him. So what do? You show you believe in him, he gets cut and he cries. You know, this is when he's little, but what do you do? I mean, this could be something really serious, right?
Right.
I mean, want to take 4 AP classes plus all this other stuff. I can say, that's not going to happen because this could happen, right?
Right.
And you get overwhelmed, depressed, and
So that's a perfect example. Your son, your child's really loving one sport or one activity, and they don't make it. They don't make that next premier level or whatever that is. And so that's when they're crying, it's a loss. So of course they're going to cry. That's a normal, healthy reaction to have a disappointment. But to help them see that disappointment doesn't define them.
But you go ahead and let them have it.
Yeah.
Because you're saying here, make sure that they're realistic goals. So if they say, I want to be the next professional athlete, you say it's not going to happen.
You can say you can go for it, but let's see how that works. And at some point, it's going to become obvious if they don't have that talent, right? I'm not going to ever be 6 feet tall. That's just not going to happen, no matter how much I want that. And we're not always going to be able to get that. We have a finite sense to us, and I think that it's very common to tell a first grader, oh, you can do anything you want, and they can do anything they want, but they might not achieve at the level that they want to do. So your son can still play soccer. He could maybe even teach soccer camp to other kids, but he might not be able to go further on that team.
Right. The question is, when do you tell them your goals are unrealistic?
It's usually a conversation that's going to come out. So when they're crying and they're like, I'm so disappointed I didn't get the team, you can start saying, well, how do you, do you think that that's the right spot for you, that team? Or do you think maybe playing on this other team might be a better idea? What do you think? And start helping them to be able to self-judge what's appropriate.
And she's saying sort of expand. You're kind of expanding options and kind of exploring those. And ultimately, there is going to be some sadness. That's sort of part of building this resiliency as well.
Right.
And it's hard to watch your kid when they're sad. But so finding...
That was no big deal. It's when you see failures about to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to...
The train crash. Yeah.
Right. When do you protect them? One of my friends said, you're going to let them commit academic suicide. When do you let them commit it versus saying, no, that's too much, I can't take on that much. And that's, to me, it's all connected. Because you let them commit academic suicide, then it gets depressed, and then, I don't know.
Yeah, 4 AP classes is a lot. I think it's fine for parents to have rules to say, you can take 2 or you can take 3 depending on your students. Some students can handle 4. I know somebody who did that in a senior year and they got straight A's. So it's remarkable, but very unusual. Very unusual. So you can have guidelines. You can say you can only play one sport at a time. You can't play soccer and do cross country. No, that's too much. You can have, guidelines to help your teen. And the other thing is that teens are in different places of development. One person's teen might be really mature, and another person's teen at the same age might not have that maturity or that discernment developed yet too. And so as a parent, you kind of need to, this goes back to the scaffolding, kind of, do they need more or less guidance from me? And as you see kind of the train crash happening, talk to them about it. I'm really worried. You're not getting any sleep, you're behind in your homework, you've got all these classes, how are you doing? And help them start to be part of the solution, because that's what you're preparing them, is to be able to do that when they're 25 and 30 and make that regrouping. Coping strategies, these are in your handouts, and these are actually the coping strategies we hand out with Teen Screen. So all the students that go through it, we give them these. So different ways of really self-care and kind of taking good care of yourself. I love this one, turn up the music and sing loudly. I do that all the time in the car. We've got some resources in there for you, and Meredith and I wanted to open up to any additional questions. Yes?
Talking, communicating with your teens, important. Are there some guidelines about one parent versus both parents at a time? Does the mom do it better than the dad? Does it depend? What are the guidelines?
Yeah, I think it depends on the relationship. A lot of times the same-sex parent can be really powerful, but sometimes, as we all know, sometimes teens are closer to one parent versus the other parent. Coming together, if that works for your family, can be really powerful. So both parents are there together, and we're on the same page, we're supporting you. For families to work optimally and for kids to feel really safe and taken care of, the parents work together in a hierarchy. It's not a flat hierarchy. The parents are in charge, and the parents should be in charge. It's too much for the kids to be in charge of everything. And so parents coming together and talking to
the teens is very powerful. Both Meredith and I work with, we do a lot of co-parenting counseling with divorced parents. And when divorced parents can come together and have this unified message, it's also very powerful.
But a lot of it is just being on the same page, right? So, sometimes those extreme mixed messages can be really hard. So even if one parent is communicating, but you're on the same page.
Yes.
Yeah, I have to be walking by this, but I'm retired law enforcement, and the only observation I can contribute regarding this subject is during my years in law enforcement, unfortunately, the times when we were called upon, it was too late. And on that question that was just asked, after spending time with either both parents or a single parent, that it was frequently discovered that the communication between the teen, in almost all cases, in my experience with boys, was almost non-existent. And so all the flags were there. They could see them. They didn't act upon those flags. They ignored it. Oh, just toughen up, get with it, don't worry about it. They ignored all those flags. And then unfortunately the consequence was that as a result of either not paying attention to those serious flags, it just decided it's not worth it, check it out. And with boys, your audience here looks like 95% are mothers. And that doesn't surprise me. The dads tend to not take this subject seriously.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying. We did talk about how to talk, what kind of a conversation a little bit earlier. So, because it's really important to open that up. Oh, no. I appreciated that. And thank you for sharing your experience.
One of the coping strategies you had listed was play a video game. What if that's the problem?
Well, right. So every kid's different. So
I mean,
right.
kids that just use that to escape from and just become obsessed with it.
Yeah, so what you want to do is in moderation, like everything else. But sometimes that can be a reward. Sometimes if they're having a really bad day, that's going to make them feel better temporarily. They just need that time to regroup and kind of heal and shore themselves up. So sometimes, it's appropriate. But if that's all they're doing all the time, then that's probably a symptom. It's almost an addiction, right? And you need to get their world a little bit bigger. Yeah.
Why do they want to? Is there any common?
Suicide is a really complex thing. It's counterintuitive, right? I'm assuming we all drive here, and we probably all in the last week or two were almost in a car accident, but we put the brakes on or turned the car. We didn't have to think about it, right? It's normal to protect our lives. That's the normal place to be. So when somebody's thinking about suicide, they are in so much pain and have no idea about how to get out of it. It's an enormous amount of pain. It could be all sorts of different things that lead people to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Among all these teens that you work with, there's nothing like common.
Well, usually there's the symptoms that we showed and triggering events of different kinds of loss. So it could be, not doing well in school, loss of friendships, loss of a relationship, a death in the family.
I have a comment to add a question, if you don't mind. From what I have read, I believe suicide is a copycat solution. So, people commit suicide because they know others committing suicide.
There is a contagion factor, especially with youth. So we see if there's a death of a suicide of a student at a high school, in the following year they are 300% more likely to have another death unless they do something like teen screen, so some intervention.
But my real question was, what sort of gender differences do you see in Marin County and in general of suicide? More girls, more boys?
Men die by suicide 3 to 4 times more often than women, but women attempt 3 to 4 times more often than men. So men tend to use more lethal methods like hanging, jumping off the bridge, guns, and women tend to use poisonings. So there's usually time for someone to intervene.
We're going to stick around and answer questions. We do encourage you to visit the resource table we have in the back. And the bottom line is the way we can help our children, the way we can help this community is to try to destigmatize the mental health illness. And that means talking about it. Let your children see you cry and then talk about it, Let them realize, like you said, share stories. We need to destigmatize mental illness and allow our children and our community to talk about it openly. Thank you very much. Please collect forms and then our speakers will be here.